What does the word sacred mean to you?
Sacred, something you hold very close and dear to you.
Something holy and has to do with religion.
Something important, something that's almost untouchable, unchangeable.
It's very serious. It's not something that you should goof around about or make jokes about.
Holy, faithful, something that you don't play around with. It's something extremely religious that you take extremely seriously.
Important, and that means a lot to you.
Something that's of the highest power.
Sacred means holy to me.
Like holy or
holy?
Very religious and very just spiritual.
I think you can only find sacred things in churches.
No, you can find sacred things anywhere.
Things in church are sacred, but I definitely think that there are sacred things out of church. Like family to me is very sacred, and just things that you love.
I think that everybody has something that's sacred to themselves.
Things like your family and friends and just people who mean a lot to you that could be sacred.
My family is very sacred to me. My friends, very sacred.
Friends and family are sacred as well as the home.
My religion and my family and my friends.
Something that belonged in your family down the line and things you care about.
whatever you really believe in, what you love.
Mostly I relate that word to the church.
Things at church.
Things like the cross,
The Bible.
the Eucharist.
Holy sacrament of Eucharist, the cross that he died on.
Things that are sacred to me are life in general, because life is very sacred. One taking away another's life is just very harmful. Another is one's virginity also. That's very sacred, that one should not really release it until the time is right. Marriage, to be exact. Sacred things can be found in anywhere, just not even church. Just in this world in general. This world is sacred, so we should not harm it. We should just show it love and cherish it.
What does the word sacred mean, and how do we experience it in our lives each day?
Can the sacred only be found in church or religious objects?
Or can it be the smile of a child?
The hug from a friend when you're experiencing a difficult time?
Can you experience the sacred when you are alone walking on the beach?
The answer is yes, because if God created the world and everything in it,
then everything must be sacred.
So how do we recognize the sacredness that surrounds us every day?
The sacredness of everything. That's what we'll be talking about today. Hi everyone, I'm Abe.
And I'm Vanessa.
And this is Real Faith TV. The teens on the street shared with us what they thought the word sacred meant.
And if you can only find sacred things in church.
We'll hear from them again a little later in the show, as well as meet our studio guests.
But first, let's meet our spotlight guest, Father Stanley Gomes.
Father Gomes is a Catholic chaplain at Seton Hall University in West Orange, New Jersey.
Next, he shares what the word sacred is and places we can find the sacred other than church.
The sacred to me is holy, holiness, God's presence. We see a cross, For us, those who believe in Christ, cross becomes a very, very sacred thing, because through this cross came salvation of the world. In one corner, you see a nice painting, and the painting could be the subject matter, Blessed Mother Mary with baby Jesus, and that can remind you about sacredness, because who these people represent to you because of your faith. Suppose we go to a special place, a holy person was born there, lived there, something extraordinary thing happened, maybe a place of death, maybe a place of tragedy, can also bring us the idea of sacredness. Ground Zero is a sacred ground, and then Pentagon, the field in Pennsylvania, is sacred ground because people gave their lives. God has created us all in His own image, that image of God in each other, that is also sacred. When you go see sunrise, sunset, a beautiful mountain, a great lake, kind of remind me about God, His creation, and sacredness.
I think something for me that is sacred is definitely, as we said before, like the smile or laughter of a child. There's something sacred about children and the innocence that they have. Even Jesus in the gospel speaks of the innocence of the child.
Let's meet our studio guests and find out the places that are sacred to them.
Okay, they are Ariana, Rick, Justin, Sarah, Vince, Colleen, and Kate.
So what does the word sacred mean to you, or where are some of the places you have felt a sacred presence?
I want to kind of agree with Abe. Just the way that kids know the earth and know everyone around them, and they don't judge at all, and they're always happy, and they always think of things as so sacred, even if it's just a little bug or a little flower that you found.
I think of my family as very sacred to me. I know that God gave them to me to love and to cherish, and I would never trade them in for the world.
Immediately when I hear the word sacred, the first thing I think of is church.
I think I find a lot of sacredness in relationships, like relationships with other people, like Justin was saying, with my family and with my friends who are closest to me. This is something that is just like so great that it could not come from anywhere other than God.
Yeah, like the love for my family and my friends is what makes every like precious moment sacred, and I think that for me, sacred really means love and loving one another.
Every opportunity that God gives me is sacred, from having a loving family to having a healthy life.
I see God in music. It's like really cool.
In Genesis chapter 1, we discover the creation of the world.
All things that God made, from water and land to light and dark,
To birds and land animals, fish and trees.
God looks at creation and says it is good.
This isn't just good like, sure, that was good pizza last night.
This good defines creation as being reflective of God.
God is good, and so is all that he has made.
All things aren't made in God's image like people are.
But they reflect him.
In this way, they are sacred, and they point us back to God in some way. So how do we go about recognizing the sacred around us?
That's what we ask the teens on the street.
Let's check it out.
What advice do you have for other young people to recognize the sacred in our everyday life and in the world around us?
Just go to church every Saturday or Sunday if you can. It's only an hour of your day, and makes you feel better inside.
To not be too materialistic, I think, to be thankful for the little things. And if something bad happens, try to get the good out of it.
Read the Bible, you know, and learn what Jesus did, and then they can aspire to be like him.
Go out there and just enjoy life. Don't spend so much time with video games and stuff, and just meet people of different backgrounds and different lives, learn about different people because everyone's had a different experience.
I say just hold on what's close to you.
Cherish what you have, because one day it could be gone.
Appreciate everything you have and be grateful for stuff, and then you'll know what's sacred and what's not.
Just like analyze what's more important to you.
I don't know, I think it's just be good to others, like God wants you to be.
Don't think about what other people want for you, think about what you want for you, because when you do, you'll see what's truly important and sacred in your life.
Cherish everything like as it was your own, and like just respect people.
Take some time alone and just think things through. Think about what really matters to you.
Get in touch with your religious side.
The Catechism of the Church tells us that God has revealed himself to us from the very beginning of time.
It says, God, who creates and conserves all things by his word, provides men with constant evidence of himself in created realities.
The key word here is constant.
Constant reminders for God are around us in what we see, feel, hear, touch, and taste.
Next, Father Gomes tells us what is most sacred to him and other places and situations where we can reveal the sacred in our lives.
When we, as Catholics, go to a chapel, when we look at the tabernacle, that's the holiest holy, you know. Jesus Christ truly present in the Eucharist. That is the most sacred thing that we all can agree with. Some of them can be kind of quote-unquote religious, some of them may not be religious, but sacred too. Like a child, a baby, newborn baby, you know, just when you just touch the tiny little fingers of the baby, you know, just a created being of God, and his or her parents were co-creator with God's plan. And when you look at that, it's wow, how is it possible, you know? And then in that moment, wow moment, you see sacredness, God's presence, you know? And then other things happen. When somebody dies, as we always pray for happy death, you know? When we pass from this life to the next, there's an encounter between the Creator and the created being. That is a sacred moment. So, but that passing moment, you know, so it could be very sacred. In the church, when we celebrate different sacraments, you know, baptism, weddings, you know, First Communion, all those celebrations, we find God's sacredness. Like when you go to confession, can you imagine? When the tear comes out after receiving the absolution, it is a tears of joy, tears of reconciliation, and that is a sacred moment, you know. And you think that like what a blessing, a little talking about our darkness can bring us to that holiness. So there are plenty in life, and I think we need to be open to receive those.
You know, I definitely have to agree with Father Gomes when he says that death is a sacred moment, and it's really one of those sacred moments that we tend to overlook. It's really difficult to not get upset when someone you love dies, but when you really think about it, that person's going on to heaven.
When my great-grandfather died last year, I was very upset about it. But then I kind of realized that every time he was in the hospital, he was praying to God to let him come home.
I know for me, like Rick was saying before, like one way that I find sacredness a lot is through music. And like there'll be certain times, like if I'm listening to a certain song, like it'll just like really seems to get me.
You know, things we take for granted every day can be sacred, you know, like a sunset, you know, sunrise, nature, you know, spending time with friends and family.
I feel that once we recognize the sacredness of something, it changes how we look at it for the rest of our lives. We can then grow from that and then, you know, make choices throughout our life that reflect the fact that we acknowledge that these events are sacred.
It isn't always easy to recognize the sacred in our fast-paced world.
Our culture doesn't always seem to support the idea of the sacredness of life in the world around us.
Next, we asked the teens on the street how they thought our culture makes it difficult to recognize sacred things.
Mainly the media, because there are a lot of things that are being portrayed out there. They're downplaying things that are very serious, so this is affecting our faith and our culture, actually.
We're easily influenced by media. People are saying, oh, church is stupid, church is a waste of time. But really, they don't know what church is really about. They don't take the time to really experience it.
I think American culture is becoming too materialistic. People are focusing too much on that and not focusing enough on family and friends.
They like take everything for granted and make everything seem like it's so unimportant and like it's just like you can get it and you can come by anything, but you really can't. Like some people can't come by family and like parents, and like some people don't have what other people have.
People just take advantage of what they have.
A lot of people like to peer pressure others, and that makes it hard to like just know what you want to do and like what you believe in.
Lack of respect and responsibility.
A lot of discrimination, a lot of distractions around, and a lot of influences.
Our culture kind of takes this sidetrack away from what's mainly important.
With technology, it really distracts you from all the sacred things that you really should be focusing on.
There's video games, there's phones. People don't really have a need to talk anymore, and because of that, people become very closed off from the world. You lose something with technology as you gain connectivity.
There's a lot of things such as they legalize, I think, something about abortions, that all doctors have to permit abortions, and that, I mean, that's killing a child, so that a child is extremely sacred, so you can't recognize that when you're allowed to kill something inside of you that's living.
Yeah, I definitely feel like a lot of teens on the street had the same overall message where whether it was the media or just a lack of respect, we are becoming desensitized.
Next, Father Gomes also shares why it's difficult in our time and culture to identify the sacred.
And why an attitude of gratitude will help us to see the sacred in our lives.
Our culture makes it difficult to see that sacredness or hear the things of sacredness. Culture today is very noisy. We have to be busy, we have to do something, but not that many people appreciate the time of contemplation or time of silence, time of golden opportunity to get to know each other in a different, intimate way. We as young people, we demand so much, we expect so much. It should be given to me. A kind of attitude of being privileged. Young people should have an attitude of gratitude. You know, in thankfulness, I think a lot of things happen. That's why in the church, our best prayer is a prayer of thanksgiving. We call it Eucharist, Eucharistia, thanksgiving. Thankfulness to God and to others can bring us to holiness, sacredness, through which you will be able to see God's goodness, kindness, other people's goodness, kindness, generosity, and then you'll see sacredness.
What other ways have you found it difficult in today's culture to see the sacred?
And what are some ways we can overcome these cultural roadblocks?
We have like the advanced technology like iPods and cell phones and the TV, and it distracts us from really seeing the beauty of things. Like if you ever pick up a leaf and you study it, it's very beautiful. You study the detail.
It's like they don't realize how beautiful nature is and how like they can allow God into their lives. They're so busy in like their own schedule that they don't see all the miracles around them.
Because there's so much technology, we don't have the opportunity to slow down and take the time to see the leaf.
Now, see, one thing I'm taking up issue with is that we're all saying that technology is blocking us from understanding what's sacred, but can't we try and use technology to incorporate into what we think is sacred? And isn't technology sacred in itself? By being something that has been developed from us as humans, it comes therefore from God transitively. we are able to make advanced medicines. We are able to, have great transportation. We are able to communicate quickly in times of crisis. Technology is also something sacred that should be valued.
We can use technology to make something sacred to other people, just calling up like your grandparents or your family that's away, or just people that don't have people to go visit them or call them up just so they can talk to them for a little bit.
I definitely have to agree with Vince. I mean, technology is what allows us to cure diseases. I feel as a generation, like with all the justifications that we make in our lives and all the immoral things that we do, we sort of lose what's sacred.
Some of the more profound sacred moments in our lives involve either great joy or great sadness.
Of course, God is with us in these good and bad times.
We are reminded that we belong to God who is with us during these ups and downs, these sacred moments in our lives when we read Psalm 100.
Know that the Lord is God, our Maker to whom we belong, whose people we are, God's well-tended flock.
Next, the teens on the street share with us the profound times in their lives when they recognize the sacred.
And how these sacred times can bring us closer in our relationship with God.
I went to the Philippines last summer, and after I left the Philippines, my family members left me letters from each of my cousins. I still keep them. That's pretty sacred to me.
When my grandfather died, he had a watch that he passed down to my father, and my father passed it down to me.
I recognize my father's death as like something pretty important to me.
There's a one man who stands by a certain PATH train station in New York. Every day I passed him, I gave him my spare change, and he recognized me, and one day he actually thanked me, and I didn't really know that he noticed me at all because he sees 1,000 people a day sitting on that street corner, and that was something that was, in a way, beautiful.
A couple years ago, I was in a really bad car accident, and me and my brothers and my mom were in it, and somehow we all came out fine from it, and it made me realize how sacred our lives were.
I just had another baby cousin, so that was definitely sacred to be in the hospital and see my aunt, love her child that she just had. So that was definitely sacred.
I saw how everyone was so happy when my younger cousin was born, and seeing that the life that we may have not known that he was going to be alive, but he was here, and we were all just very happy that this sacred thing happened.
It's the memorial of Jesus Christ we have every year. And that memorial, we pass bread around, we pass wine around. And that time, we just like what you said, we take the time to really appreciate what Jesus done. He came to this earth and died for us. So that's a really sacred moment where I honestly wouldn't miss it for the world.
How can recognizing and experience the sacredness in our life bring us closer in our relationship with God?
I think it would just point out more the fact that he's real.
Realizing that stuff that's more sacred definitely brings you closer to God because you want to thank Him more for having those sacred things in your life. And, without Him, those sacred things wouldn't be there.
When people recognize the sacredness and the holiness in their everyday life, they can realize how God is with them all the time, and it'll just bring them closer to Him.
Half of the understanding of how sacred all things are is stopping and recognizing it.
In some way we know, but we forget. In some ways, we just take for granted what is around us.
But when we realize that God is not just some faraway figure, but constantly reminds us and gives us evidence of Himself,
we can become closer and more intimate with Him.
When we become more intimate with Him, we can experience God more easily through the people He puts in our lives.
Whether that is our parents, friends, or the guy who cut us off on the highway.
Seeing the sacred in all things gives us reason to love what is true, good, and beautiful, and to become more holy, more sacred ourselves in our own daily lives.
So when have you guys experienced a sacred moment in your lives?
I experienced a sacred moment, being able to be patient like Jesus was, when this woman cut us off and she thought it was our fault, and she was just yelling at us. And my dad was it's easy to get angry and it's easy to just curse back, but think of what Jesus would do.
There was one time I was in the grocery store and I had just run in to get one thing, and there was a person in front of me with full cart, lots of things, and he saw that I only had just one thing in my hand, so he was like, why don't you go in front of me? Just the fact that, he had taken 2 seconds to do something nice I thought was sacred, and when I left, I was thinking, I just said to him, God bless. Bye.
Actually, my moment that I'm thinking about now, we were here at the studio, and I was talking to Sarah, and I was telling her I had a really tough year the year before, and I was questioning everything about my life and my faith. And she just responded by saying, well, that means that God has put you here to do something, that you've stayed through it all, and that you've recovered, and you're such like a better person now. And ever since then, that's all I think about.
Yeah, and I keep referring back to that, and that's definitely a sacred moment for me, because I got to talk to you about that, and then I made a great friend at the end, so.
Something funny that my dad always does whenever he's driving and someone cuts him off, just before he's about ready to start yelling and screaming, he stops and he says, "Thank you, Lord, for testing my patience." And it's funny, but it's profound also in the sense that little moments like that, like even the bad things that happen to us, can be sacred moments because they do put us through tests like that. So.
My grandmother recently passed away from Alzheimer's, and when she was alive, I would come visit her, and seeing her in her bed, not able to take care of herself, really made me realize how precious and valuable life is and sacred. And it brought me to a new appreciation for it and how to live in the moment and be thankful for what I have.
A couple years ago, I was at an acquaintance's, I guess, pool party or something like that, graduation, who knows. She had a trampoline, and her younger cousins were playing on the trampoline, and all the other big kids were just sitting around watching the kids play. At that moment, looking at those two kids have just the time of their life, that innocence, that purity, that just grace was so beautiful and so magnanimous in my life that I knew that God is there and that God is love, and that I just felt such a spirit wash over me at that moment.
Finally, Father Gomes describes where he witnesses the sacred in the lives of the young people he ministers at Seton Hall University.
He also shares with us how the words of Blessed Mother Teresa of Calcutta inspires him to recognize the sacred in our everyday moments.
I see young people's life is bursting with sacredness. Here at the University Parish, I celebrate holy liturgies for them: Mass, Sacrament of Reconciliation, baptisms, weddings, and other wonderful things. Through those processes, those liturgies and sacraments, I get to see them in a very different angle. Their love for God, love for one another. So I see sacredness. Also, I get to see the difficult side of that, when they struggle with studies, struggle with to continue in the university. Private universities are expensive. They do appreciate their parents' struggle, parents' contribution toward their education. And in those moments, I see the thankfulness in their eyes. I see sacredness in them. And even when they fall, we may commit sins, we may have lack of love, lack of respect for others. Those moments when they repent and return to the Father's house, I see sacredness. Those who seek holiness inspire or challenge their other friends to come to or seek holiness through finding God, having a close relationship with God. And here I always remind myself what I heard from Mother Teresa one time. She said, we have to find God in ordinary situations with extraordinary love. So that means we can find sacredness, God's presence in ordinary things, like in sports, like in a wedding, like when we are eating together. Those ordinary moments, we can find the extraordinary presence of God.
I was wondering, before I watched that, like, how could you find something sacred not in church? Because when I think of sacred, I think church. But after hearing that, he really made me realize everything that I'm part of is a gift from God, and that's sacred to me.
One of my most favorite things is going down to my beach house, because it's my uncle, my aunt, my grandparents, and my family. And we only have one rule in the whole entire house. And the one rule is that you have to be home to eat dinner with everybody. Being able, though, to sit down and talk to your family, and then be able to also go out and see your friends, but know that when you come home, you all have your family waiting for you.
Whenever I sit down and draw, I definitely remember, where my gifts come from.
I know what you mean, because like I'm a musician, I play piano, and I'll ask God to help me with my performance, and it's just like when I'm being there and playing, I feel so in the moment, like God is there with me, helping me, and I think that that's a sacred moment as well.
It isn't really that often that we find ourselves on the sacred ground or in the presence of blessed objects.
But every day we find ourselves in the presence of God, and it is in many ordinary ways that we experience Him.
All that is true, good, and beautiful comes from God.
So many things around us point to God in this way.
But we can also bring the sacred to the things around us.
For example, doing a kind act for a sick neighbor allows the circumstances to be blessed by goodness.
This ordinary act becomes holy because we are sharing ourselves with someone else in need.
Any way we can share our gifts is a way to bring God to a situation, because our goodness also reflects His.
When we bring ourselves to situations in our love, our service, our kind words, our sacrifices are holy.
It brings a situation closer to God.
It brings us closer to God.
When have you recognized the sacred in your life?
Tell us your story.
Contact us at realfaithtv.com.
Or share your thoughts with us on Twitter.
And we'll leave you today with these words from John's first letter, chapter 4.
We have come to know and to believe in the love God has for us.
God is love.
And whoever remains in love remains in God, and God in him.
In this is love brought to perfection among us.
Let us share this amazing love of God with others,
and be witnesses to the sacredness that surrounds us,
so that others may recognize the beauty and wonder of God and experience His presence in a deeper way.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time on
Real Faith TV. God bless.